to spend a bunch of time underwater, which was a grueling, difficult, challenging process.
Rings of Power has proven to be an insanely difficult show to produce.
We did a lot of stunt training and fight training, which all bled into...
Not only for the actors, but for the stunt performers, the crew, and the visual effects team. Have you been wondering what kind of chaos was going on behind the scenes? Well, we've got answers for you.
It would be challenging by the end of the day.
Number 1. It can be hard to remember every single one. The cast had many weeks to prepare, so most of the time they had all of their lines down pat. But of course, there's always bound to be a few mistakes.
I think everyone also did occasionally forget their lines.
Morfydd Clark wasn't the only one to forget a few lines here and there, but one day while working a scene with Charlie, she had to do a lot more takes than usual.
I wasn't actually forgetting the lines, but I was doing slightly different words for every single line.
There must have been something in the air that day.
So I had to say scattered and I'd say scrambled, and I was just like, oh, no.
Number 2. There was always something being pulled amongst the cast.
There's always joking around and pulling pranks.
Maxim Baldry takes the cake for the best prank pulled on set.
He pretended to get hurt on set one day and filmed it.
Not like there weren't enough actual injuries going on. More on that later.
This poor crew member thought he'd actually hurt himself.
Sometimes you've got to create your own fun when you're waiting around in between takes. Number 3. Not as efficient as one might think. They obviously needed wind and waves during those scenes when they'd be on the raft.
And there would be occasions when we'd have huge wind machines and wave machines going.
But sometimes they would have to go old school because the machines would make too much noise.
And other times when it would just be guys with buckets of water throwing the water at us.
Charlie Vickers had a hard time just swimming in general, regardless of the simulated storm. They simulated a storm. What you see on screen is an exaggerated version of what we're going through. It was definitely physically challenging. I swim quite a bit, but I'm not a really amazing swimmer. Number 4. Not only were they fully practical, but the cast was pretty terrified of them. The makeup department spent hours perfecting their look, well before any of the other cast members had even woken up.
You're getting in there at 7 a.m. being like, gosh, it's so early, and the Orcs have been there since half midnight.
The actors who played them were all super friendly, but Morfydd Clark admits she was actually scared of them.
It was really frightening.
She didn't even need to act.
I feel really lucky that we got to actually be terrified by very nice people, but in prosthetics.
A great moment for her was working a scene with them and being terrified and then catching them eating lunch during their break. Number 5. One of the toughest new skills the cast had to pick up.
I find water really frightening, which is why I was quite scared for the dive training.
Luckily, they had an incredible team of trainers showing them the way of the water.
We did lots of training with amazing people.
Yeah, some amazing people at the top of their game.
Even with this team of A-list trainers, it was still one of the most difficult challenges they had to master. They hope that all their training shows up on screen, because without it, they wouldn't have been able to perform any of the sequences in the Sundering Seas. Number 6. It might seem fun, but they were extremely difficult to stay balanced on.
I would fall over quite a lot and fall through the cracks in the raft.
Even behind the scenes, the chaos still ensues. A lot of the crew were using paddle boards in the water, and one of the directors of photography was struggling with their balance.
One of the DOPs fell off their paddleboard.
Oh yeah, that was funny.
It makes sense why they had so many weeks of water training. Number 7. It was a never-ending experience. They had to be professionally trained so they could learn to hold their breath for at least a few minutes. In the beginning, they would start by trying to master up to 25 seconds, and then gradually push to get a few minutes underwater. Morfydd Clark describes it as, it doesn't get easier. You just get more used to ignoring the pain.
We spent so long because it was such a complex sequence.
They would switch from a big outdoor tank to a 5-meter deep dive tank.
We spent weeks and weeks out there in two different locations.
Number 8. That hot New Zealand weather really took a toll on the actors. Though it was wonderful to have natural light while shooting, the actors really needed to pack some extra SPF.
It's so glary and you're surrounded by sort of like a backdrop.
Of course, the backdrop was white, so it would reflect the sun right back at them. They couldn't escape it throughout the entire shoot. One thing they liked about being outside was the fact that it really did give them the impression that they were out there on isolated water. The tank was really that big.
Because it was so big, you could suspend your disbelief that it kept on going.
Number 9. Dwarves, elves, humans, and Harfoots, all different heights. How did they do it? Yeah, apparently it wasn't easy and involved a dizzying array of camera tricks, different size props, actor doubles, and a headache-inducing amount of math that consumes everybody in the scene. Just a simple scene involving a dwarf and an elf walking down a hallway was one of the most difficult scenes to capture from the original script. They actually ended up switching it to a mineshaft elevator, which was still incredibly difficult to pull off. Number 10. There are always a few on-set injuries. Quite a few stunt performers got their fair share of pain, but one, in particular, was Dana Grant, who suffered a pretty serious head injury. It was definitely a freak accident, as she regularly performs dangerous stunts in productions like Mad Max, Wonder Woman, and many, many other movies. She's probably more comfortable being on fire than anyone you've ever met, but due to a misplaced bolt, she hit her head when taking a dive into one of the dive tanks. She was diagnosed with an 8mm brain aneurysm and an injury to her upper spine, and had to get emergency brain surgery. Concerned fans ended up raising money so she would be able to get the surgery she needed. Number 11. There was always a performance to watch.
We did sing a lot.
Markella Kavenagh and Megan Richards were constantly performing for the cast.
We would be singing something.
They had quite a reputation.
And one of the hair and makeup artists was just like, oh, I've heard about this.
Apparently, they're both fantastic singers, so nobody ever complained about it. One of their favorite songs they would perform together was The Best by Bonnie Tyler, also very notably covered by Tina Turner. Number 12. Another show that was almost shut down by COVID-19. The first episode of the season holds a special place in Morfydd Clark's heart because they had to stop midway due to the spread of COVID. The show started filming in New Zealand, and at the time, New Zealand was taking serious precautions to protect itself from the virus. It was mandated that everyone entering the country, including returning citizens, had to self-isolate. Most of the cast was unsure if they would be able to come back.
Coming back to film it was just so wonderful.
Rings of Power definitely wasn't an easy show to pull off.
We wouldn't have been able to do what we did without that training.
Yeah.
But with a stellar team behind all of these camera tricks, painful stunts, intense water training, and insanely realistic prosthetics, the dedicated Lord of the Rings fanbase will definitely have a lot to digest by the end of it.
We were really excited about that the whole time.
Yeah.